welcome to the Zest, the official podcast of Orange Coast Magazine. I'm Chelsea Ranieri, and today's guest is a best-selling author and a clinical nutritionist whose client list includes Jennifer Garner, Chelsea Handler, and Jessica Alba. Thank you so much for being here today, Kelly LeVeque.
Hey, thanks, Chelsea. It's good to be here.
Yay. So I actually was first introduced to your brand, Be Well by Kelly, at the Hoag's Her Summit last year. And I was just so fascinated by everything you had to say about nutrition. So I've been really looking forward to getting to talk with you.
Well, I love that event. Hoag is such a phenomenal hospital in Southern California and where I delivered both my boys. So it's always a great time to give back there.
Amazing. So to start, where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Orange County. I grew up in Rancho Mission Viejo and went to Santa Margarita Catholic High School. And I've been born and raised in Orange County. I spent 20 years in LA building my business and going to college, and then made my way back here to raise my boys.
Amazing. And what were you like as a kid?
Pretty active. I played club soccer growing up. I was always really involved. Christian leadership, ASB. I love my friends. Actually, the girls I grew up with and played club soccer with were my bridesmaids and some of my best high school friends I've stayed really close with. So it's been fun to come home and reconnect with everyone. I mean, we've always been connected, but to really get to see them more. And I cherish the relationship I have with my parents, my sisters. And so, it's good to be home.
Nice. So you're back in Orange County now?
I'm back in Orange County now. Yep. Purchased our first home in Laguna Niguel, and we're constantly at the beach at Salt Creek and down at Trestles. My husband's a big surfer. So it really matches our lifestyle, being able to be down here with community and outside a lot and really enjoying like all the benefits of SoCal, like all the produce. We love the ecology center down here and hitting the farmer's market. So it's good to be home.
Awesome. Well, I read that you fell in love with nutrition in high school. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah. So, what's interesting is I took health in high school and I loved that class. I felt like it was really easy for me to get a great grade. I would look forward to the class, took tedious notes, and then I went to the University of Southern California, basically because I'm a legacy there. I grew up going to football games there at USC. I had 26 relatives that went there. And so as the first child in my family, followed in my grandpa and father's footsteps. Actually, I went to the Marshall School of Business in undergrad there, and then realized my senior year at USC when I took Nature of Human Health and Disease that just like health in high school, it was my absolute favorite class. It was almost like I was absorbing all the information via osmosis, like it stuck for me. Ultimately called my dad in tears going into my senior year and said, I want to be pre-med. I shouldn't be finance, and added a concentration in Nature of Human Health and Disease. And my first career out of college, I spent on the corporate side of wellness. So I worked in pharmaceuticals and then made my way into cancer and genetics. And I had an 8-year career in cancer and genetics before going back to school for nutrition and starting my private practice.
So going back a bit, what about health fascinated you and nutrition fascinated you?
Well, I think I grew up an athlete and I loved feeling my best, and I've always loved food. But I would just say that I was more of a science and math brain, like stats and all the things that, a lot of my best girlfriends hated was what I excelled in, really. And I just found it interesting. Like I always wanted to feel my best and I wanted to perform my best on the field. And I loved cooking, and even down to watching Ina Garten and Giada in college on the Food Network. Like those were the shows I'd throw on in the background of like studying or doing homework. And I think we really need to tune into what we truly are fascinated by and what we love, and find a way to pair what we're passionate about with what we're good at. And then hopefully those two things is also something you could have a career in. For me, I was a little disillusioned in undergrad when I looked into the RD program, because it seemed like the only career trajectory was to end up in a hospital setting. And the hospital food programs are nothing to write home about, really. There's just a lot of government mandates there, and food contracts that really don't allow for creativity, and really they don't allow for the highest level of health for patients, unfortunately. And there's a lot of red tape. And so it didn't really get me excited about having a career in a hospital setting. And so I didn't really think about private practice until, like I said, about 8 years after having a career in Western medicine and in big corporate health.
Oh.
And so, I saw that there were other people building private practices in nutrition and helping people privately, and ultimately decided to go back to school. And my business was a side hustle for 3 years. And I used my corporate career to fund this business, to take it seriously, to build my website. And I built my clientele on the weekends and at nights, and then ultimately took it full time and took it very seriously. Went out and got my first book deal, and built product business, and built a course business. And I really tried to help people as much as I could for free online. And it kind of feels like it's been a blink, and it's been 11 years.
When you went back to school, what did you study?
So I did clinical nutrition. So I had to go back, and I was in Santa Monica at the time. I had to go back to Santa Monica City College and take those pre-med sciences. And, it took me multiple years to complete.
Wow.
But it was absolutely worth it. I mean, I did a health coaching program to be able to punch my ticket and start health coaching at first. And then ultimately went back to clinical nutrition, again, at nights and online, to get all those courses under my belt to be able to sit for the clinical nutrition board exam. And so, it's been a wild ride, but I would say I probably learned the most actually working with the functional MDs that I've worked with. So a functional MD is someone who's, gone to school to either be internal medicine or ER, and they go back for a fellowship in functional medicine. And that's looking at root cause and working as a team with functional MDs that I have relationships with their patients. So we have a great amount of detail on their health levels. So we get everything from hormone panels to NutriVals. We're looking at nutrient, their nutrient status. We're looking at all of the traditional, like Quest lab health, metabolic health, thyroid health, cardiovascular health. And so then I'm able to look at all that detail and help them build a food plan to improve those markers. And that's the really fun part.
Wow. And you're still doing that today?
Yeah. So I still have a private practice. I work with a few functional MDs that I built relationships with in Los Angeles and New York. And then I have my online courses, and I share online through Be Well by Kelly just to support my community.
Yeah. And I read that your friend actually is the one that pushed you to start Be Well by Kelly. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That goes back to that passion. It was my best friend, Angela. We went to USC undergrad together, and we lived together in Santa Monica after college. And I was that friend that at the party was like, did you know that pairing protein and fat supports blood sugar balance? And did you know that leafy greens have a sulfur-based sugar that feeds your microbiome? And I was, she was not interested in any of that. But at one point she just stopped me and she said, this is clearly an obsession that you love, and you want to share this knowledge with people, and you need to find a way to do that. And starting anything new and supporting yourself in that can be very scary.
Yeah. And
I was at a place where I was only out of college for a few years, and I was just getting started in the working world and just starting to save. I didn't have a house, and I was relying on my income to pay my apartment rent and all of that. And so starting it as a side hustle felt safe enough. I always tell the nutritionists that I mentor that you want to jump off a curb and not a cliff. And so how do you set yourself up to do that? And if you're really passionate about something, you'll be excited to do it after work. You'll be just excited to do it on the weekend, and you'll build it up to a place where you feel comfortable taking it full time. And so one of the things I did actually is when I was working in cancer and genetics, I went to my boss and I was going to put in my 2 weeks and was feeling like maybe I'd love a few more months. And so I actually negotiated a part-time role working with the top hospitals and team that I was working with, Cedar Sinai being one of them. And they carved out a new role for me. So I think if you are enough of an asset and you're working hard enough in the career that you're in, you always have room to negotiate what you want. And instead of thinking that you need to completely leave or cut it off and make a scary jump. And it was great. I had 6 months and I worked as a contractor for the corporate company that traditionally had employees paid via W-2, but anything is negotiable. And like I said, if you're an asset and you're working hard enough and you've built the relationships, and I had phenomenal relationships with the physicians I was working with at the time. And I felt really excited about the cancer space in general as well. I think that came through. And my boss was like, thanks for being transparent about your future goals about this business. And we're happy to create a role for you. And so my advice would be, don't be afraid to be creative and just speak into existence what you want, because that can be what you need and the runway you need to feel comfortable taking it full time. And that 6 months was great. I was able to, work hard, close deals, save a little money so that I had a little buffer room for taking my business full time.
That's so smart. I've never thought to negotiate like a position like that. And you went full time in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
How did that feel like initially when you just when after that 6 months ended and you took this on full time, and what were you doing at that point?
Well, it can be very scary for having a corporate career. And it's really different to have a salary, like the security of a salary versus working as a nutritionist. I was an hourly employee. And that meant that whatever my hourly rate was, however many hours were in the day, that's what my take home was. Right. So I went from having the security of a corporate salary and getting a paycheck every 2 weeks to having a calendar of clients. But, if someone canceled, that hourly rate was gone, and looking for ways to really fill my time and fill my calendar to maximize that. Mm-hmm. But in the long term, that kind of working schedule will burn someone out. And something I remember from USC Marshall undergrad was that, one of my professors said the majority of millionaires who live here in Los Angeles have 5 streams of income. They diversify their income and they don't stick with one. And if you can find a way to diversify your income in your business or diversify your income through investments, that should be your long-term goal. And so when I was at the time of working with clients, I realized I'm in the service-based industry. There's only so many hours in the day. I need to work too hard to maintain or replace my income, which at the time wasn't really totally possible. And so I looked at ways to diversify. So I looked at coming out with products. I looked at coming out with courses that people could learn while I wasn't physically there, taped courses. But I started with my book. And so I sat down with a friend of mine who had published a book in interior design and asked her what the process was about. I'm always pretty curious. And it was simply a coffee. And then I understood the process of publishing a book.
Wow.
There are so many different ways to publish, but the traditional way would be getting an agent, writing a proposal, shopping that proposal, and then writing your book. And depending on the agent, they either want you to have a large audience so that it's an easy sell, and or they're willing to work with you. And at the time, I didn't have a large audience, but I had a lot of excitement towards this process. And so I cold emailed 12 agents that didn't know me, and I got 3 emails back, and I booked a flight to New York, and I had 3 sit-down meetings. I decided to contract with an agent, and 2 months later we were shopping my book. So I feel like what can feel so scary, like writing a book, can be really distilled down into like the small steps it takes and then it doesn't feel as overwhelming. And especially as an entrepreneur, like deciding to quit your corporate job might feel overwhelming. Well, how can I make that a smaller, easier step? How can I jump off a curve instead of a cliff? Well,
Yeah.
let's contract a smaller role inside of this big corporate company. So I have the time to build up my calendar, build up my business to where it feels comfortable. And the same goes for building multiple streams of income. Like now with three little kids, 5 and under, like I want to be a present mom. I have to be there for them as the only income and working parent in our family. I want to be able to provide a home for them and pay for school and sports and be present at the same time. That old career that I built of seeing 6 to 8 clients a day and then providing them nutrition plans at the end of the day was a 13 or 14-hour workday sometimes.
Wow.
And that is unsustainable at this age with the family that I've built. So I think what entrepreneurs, like I said, when I'm working with younger nutritionists or even entrepreneurs that are asking me, like, the best tips is check in with yourself. Is the career that you're building sustainable for the life that you want? And if it's not, is it okay right now? Yeah, it was great back then because I only had myself and my husband, Chris. And at the time we were just dating. It was fun. Like we were inspired. We were building our business. We would hit the gym together, go to yoga class, make dinner together, and then jump back into like creating and building and dreaming. And that was totally appropriate for that period of our life. But right now, like it wouldn't have been appropriate. So thinking about the ways that you can diversify your business to have multiple forms of income under your umbrella, or how can you take that income that you're building and find ways to invest in other ways? And maybe that's real estate or other types of investments. And so I'm always looking to diversify because that feels like security and safety, even though I'm my own boss and my own income. It's the security and safety of the old corporate world in my new world today.
Yeah. And in 2019, so just 2 years later, you published your second book, Body Love Every Day. What's in both of the books and how are they similar and different?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is the course I took at USC, Nature of Human Health and Disease. The thesis or the end project for that class was a report on type 2 diabetes and how it develops in the body and understanding and presenting on blood sugar balance. And it's so funny because that full circle, that is what Body Love and Body Love Every Day is all about. It's teaching my clients in my community how to balance their blood sugar through food. And there are so many tips and tricks out there today on how to do that. Like put a little almond butter on apple. But what I want to entrust my community with is the science, because I think we're all smart enough to understand the macronutrients that we're eating and how they break down. And so both of the books go through what I call the Fab Four. And the Fab Four is simply a small checklist of things that support blood sugar balance. And the Fab Four is protein, fat, fiber, and vegetables of color, leafy greens. And so when you think about this, protein breaks down to amino acids. It doesn't break down to blood sugar or glucose. Fat breaks down to fatty acids. It doesn't break down to blood sugar or glucose. So that's not going to have any effect on our blood sugar. And then we think about fiber and leafy greens. We're thinking about all the produce. That's the broccoli, the cauliflower, the cucumbers, the side salad, the herbs, like all of those bits of produce are what we call cellular carbohydrates. The sugar and starch is wrapped up in the fiber cell. And so we have to actually chew through it to slowly release blood sugar. And so what happens when you plate the Fab Four or you put the Fab Four ingredients in a blender is your blood sugar goes up gradually and it gradually comes down. It's not a spike and crash. It doesn't cause that blood sugar roller coaster that causes cravings, irritability, mood swings, and the rest. Instead, it elongates your blood sugar curve from one meal to the next so that you can go 4 to 6 hours without thinking about food, so that you can function at your, highest level. And it is easy for anyone. So I use it with kids. I coach my clients to use it with their kids. We look at a plate and we say, do we see a source of protein? Check. Did we use olive oil to cook? Healthy fat? Check. Are there any form of veggies or greens on the plate for whoever's eating it? Great. Perfect. Now we know those are the things that elongate and balance a blood sugar curve. Now we can think about the other things we might add to the plate. And most of the time that's like a processed carbohydrate. You think about like a burger, that might be the bun or a side of fries. And we think, okay, well, how many sort of like party plus ones do we have on the plate, or how many extras, right? And we just want to make sure that we are not adding too many of those things because they compound on one another. So in the burger example, if you had 2 buns and fries, and maybe you had a drink like a lemonade, that would actually be 4 different things that are causing a spike in blood sugar. So half a bun takes you a little bit up, the other half takes you higher, the fries take you higher, the lemonade's taking you very high. So that is a very steep spike in blood sugar and a crash. And so recognizing what on your food balances and elongates your blood sugar curve and what causes a spike is the first step. And then deciding, well, what can you handle? So there are people who have a great hormone profile or have lots of muscle mass or really insulin sensitive muscles and they're a super athlete, they may be able to handle more carbohydrates than someone else. But recognizing what your body is capable of digesting and absorbing into your muscles to store as energy versus causing elevated blood sugar and potentially leading us down the road towards inflammation and chronic lifestyle diseases is my bread and butter. And that's what the books teach. They teach you how to find the Fab Four if you are what I call a girl on the go. You travel for work, you're constantly at restaurants, you're on airplanes all the time. Or maybe if you are what we would call the domestic goddess, like you want to cook everything at home and hit the farmer's market. There are plans for everyone and tips and tricks depending on the type of client that I've worked with. So the first book, Body Love, talks about the Fab Four, teaches you to balance your blood sugar and how to use it as a simple, easy checklist, no strict rules. And then Body Love Every Day goes through really the nitty gritty, deeper dive into the science, but more about, well, based on your lifestyle, what are some recommendations that I might have so you feel full, calm, and satisfied with balanced blood sugar. So it's easier to make those healthy choices.
That I've never heard it explained so simply like that. That was so easy to understand and also made it so interesting as well. And as I was researching you, I read like all the different things that blood sugar impacts in your body. And I really didn't, it sounds stupid. I didn't really realize how much it does. Can you kind of talk about that?
Definitely. Well, let's talk about glucose or blood sugar, right? We talked about the buns and the fries and the lemonade, like all of those things are spiking blood sugar, right? Well, when we look at someone's glucose, that is their blood sugar, right? When we get a blood test, we're looking at glucose, we're looking at insulin, and we're looking at A1C on average. So glucose is blood sugar, and we're looking for a healthy range or a healthy level. Insulin is a hormone that picks up blood sugar. So let's say you had the buns, the fries, and the lemonade, and your blood sugar went way up, right? Your pancreas is going, oh my goodness, Chelsea, we have a lot of sugar to deal with. It's going to dump a bunch of insulin into your bloodstream. Insulin's going to kind of tag that glucose to be put away into your body, into your cells. So we store some glucose in our liver and we store some glucose in our muscles. Now, if it's not in your liver and it's not in your muscles, it's kind of hanging out in your bloodstream. And your liver either goes, hey, we need to package some of this up and store it as fat, or your blood sugar stays high. Now, when our blood sugar stays high and the insulin stays high, because it's still working really hard to put that extra sugar away, what we see is an increase in inflammation. And inflammation, unfortunately, is the groundwork. It is the foundation for all chronic lifestyle diseases. So when we see an increase in glucose, insulin, and inflammation, we have an increased chance of polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer. I mean, it is everything. It is the biggest lever you have to prevent chronic lifestyle diseases. And when we have increased inflammation and we have increased blood sugar, we also have an increase in autoimmune diseases. We have decrease in healing and muscle protein, like the healing of, let's say you go work out and you want to build strong, lean muscles. I mean, your body just unfortunately isn't going to work the way that you want it to work. And so I'm so passionate about teaching the science of blood sugar because I know everyone can still build a plate that they love, that is satisfying, and work on lowering glucose, insulin, and inflammation.
Wow. I literally had a burger yesterday. So today's going to be a salad. I'm like, that sounds so awful.
That's actually where I would stop you. And I would say, okay, Chelsea, if you were to sit down to that burger, and there's the bun and there's the fries and there's like a sugary drink, let's talk about how each of these things impact you. So the lemonade is probably, in my opinion, when we look through a blood sugar lens, is probably the worst offender.
Oh, wow.
And here's why. It's liquid sugar. There is no fiber to slow down that sugar. It is immediately digested and it jacks your blood sugar up the fastest out of any of the carbohydrates on your plate, right? So I would say that would be the first thing that I would consider replacing. Can you get a sparkling water with lemon? Great. Not totally impacting your meal, right? It's still going to be a delicious meal and you can have fun with it. If you really love lemonade, I'd say, hey, why don't you try Element? It's an electrolyte drink that doesn't have any sugar and you can get the citrus salt. It tastes like lemonade. Or you can take lemons and squeeze them in your water and bring a little monk fruit dropper with you. That's going to sweeten it a little bit and kind of a fun way to handle that. Then we look at the bun. So the bun is actually considered an acellular carbohydrate because it's a flour-based product. It has actually been removed from its fiber cell too. So what I mean by that is like if we were to take rice flour crackers versus rice, rice flour crackers are acellular carbohydrates. A machine was used to make a flour first. It's been obliterated from the cell, acellular carbohydrate. Versus rice, there's fiber still present there. Not a lot, but it's a whole grain, right? So it's going to be slower to digest and cover less surface area. It's going to have less effect on your blood sugar. So the bun is then going to have it's going to have, the bun is going to have the next, it's the next biggest offender because it's an acellular carbohydrate. If you picture a bun disintegrating in water, it's going to just kind of turn into a mushy mess. If you've ever seen crackers get wet, that kind of a thing. That's how it's being digested pretty quickly, not as fast as a lemonade, but fast. And it has a density to carbohydrates there. And then you have the fries, right? So the fries are potatoes and they are the closest resembling, they resemble the whole food product the most. And depending on where you get them and what you're sourcing, they may be as close to a potato as possible, like an In-N-Out fry, right?
Oh, okay.
You see them smash them through the fry maker, you're good to go, right? So I would say instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, let's decide what you like about a burger. Can we lettuce wrap it and have the fries with the sparkling water and still enjoy it and get all the Fab Four there? You have the protein in the meat. You probably either had like avocado or maybe a cheddar cheese on that. There's some healthy fat. Then you have lettuce, tomato, onions, whatever kind of veggies you have on there. And then if you want to level up that meal to feel a little fuller, if you take the bun away, can you get a side of roasted broccoli? Or can you get a side salad to add to that? Like that's going to be the way we use the Fab Four to bulk up that meal to make you full and satisfied, elongate your blood sugar curve, and still have a little fun with some carbohydrates without dysregulating blood sugar the whole day.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's such an easy way to look at it. I really have never looked at it like that. I always thought I felt so guilty eating I always felt so guilty eating like a protein style burger from In-N-Out. I'm like, I don't know, but that's a really right.
That is my family's go-to when we are on a road trip up to Northern California to visit family. Absolutely. Like that. I think about you really have to redefine good, right? You have to get away from perfection and you have to find the ways to be productive at a meal, to eat what you love and love what you eat, because in the long run, being good for a week versus, or trying to be perfect for a week versus being consistent and at an 80% average for 6 months, that person who can be a little bit more consistent and have a lower average is actually going to have a better blood test in the long run. And we're talking about preventing inflammation and disease. And that is the goal.
Wow. That's so interesting. So at what point did you start picking up celebrity clients, and also who was your first one?
Yeah. Well, I worked with my friend, Mike Alexander. Mike Alexander was a celebrity trainer, and he trained Jessica Alba for Daisy Dukes, or not Jessica Alba,
Oh, wow.
Jessica Simpson for Daisy Dukes back in the day. Uh-huh. And he's a good friend of mine. We've known each other since college. Jessica Simpson and Nick Lachey were huge fans of USC football, and I went to USC the year that Matt Larnert was our quarterback, and they were big fans, and we became friends. And so Mike Alexander had Eve Hewson, who was preparing for a role, and he said, "Look, I know you've always loved health and nutrition, and you started your new business on the side, but would you ever come to the gym and sit down with these clients because we're having a hard time meeting goals?" And I said, "Okay. Great. I'd love to help." And so I helped Eve Hewson prepare for a role. And then I helped Ed Hardy prepare for a role.
Oh, wow.
And then there was a beat, I'd say about like 6 months. And one of my friends who worked in the event planning space actually was launching Honest Launch. So Honest Company launching at Target. And they had a big party. And she said, "We'd love to have a sort of an installation of you having mini health sessions with the influencers that come to the party." Because there's a bunch of beauty, health, and wellness influencers there. And I said, "Sure." And so she sat me in a little chair, and I was, really passionate. And it was after work one day in the afternoon, and I was sitting there excited to tell everybody how to balance their blood sugar and increase nutrient intensity. And the influencer all sort of walked by me and looked over, and they're like, "What is that girl doing?" And there wasn't great signage. And so I just sat there and was like waving at people. They're like, "We don't know." Okay. And so the party wrapped. The party was wrapping up, and I'd worked with the caterer and built out a beautiful Fab Four, build your own bowl, sort of like, meal for them. And so they could come and build a bowl with protein and fat and veggies. And so my friend who had thrown the party was like, "Well, why don't you go over to like the food section and tell people what the benefits are in their food?" And so I stood over the build your own bowl, and I was like, "That's a great source of protein. There's vitamin K and vitamin D in that." And was giving people all the tips, and they're like, "Oh, this is a great catering company. Is it yours?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a nutritionist. I'm here to tell you about how to be healthy in your body." Right. So I ultimately went back to my little furniture vignette, and I sat down, and this cute redhead came up, and she's like, "Hey, can I sit down?" And I've just been doing makeup this whole time. And she was Jessica Alba's makeup artist. And Jessica was doing press at the party in a private room, and she was going to come out and have a meet and greet with all the influencers. I said, "Please sit down." And I didn't know who she was. And my hands just get so swollen. I was like, "That's interesting." Kind of asked her about her diet. And I ultimately got to this place because she had, living in LA and the popularity of anti-inflammatory diets or paleo diets at the time and vegan diets. And she's like, "I've done everything." And we got to this point where I said, "Nightshades can cause arthritic issues. Have you ever tried eliminating nightshades?" And she's like, "No, but I'll try it." And do you have, she gave me her email, and I shared with her via email, a couple of articles and some things I would consider. And 2 weeks later, I had an email introduction to Jessica Alba. She's like, "Jessica,
wow,
you wanted to meet the nutritionist who was at your party. Completely, I don't have any inflammation in my joints anymore. I have no pain in my hands. And Jess wants to meet with you. I've known her since junior high. She's my soul sister. She wants you to come to her house." And so that was, as a excited entrepreneur who wasn't paid to work this party, was just excited doing it for my friend who was working for a big event planning company, as an opportunity to kind of flex my knowledge and get excited about it. I spent couple $100 on my dress. I got my hair and makeup done. I took the afternoon of my corporate career job off. I drove across LA in LA traffic, and I sat there and no one talked to me for 2 hours. So I sort of made a fool of myself a little bit, and then sat down and in an effort just help this girl who had obviously been working, her name was Lauren, working really hard all day for however many hours doing makeup and touch-ups, was able to help her, and then ultimately had this sort of unexpected introduction to someone who I think, well, not only do I look up to Jessica, I think she's an amazing woman, an entrepreneur and mom. She's a dear friend. And she wrote the foreword to my book. And I think that in life, you attract the type of people that you want to help when you believe in yourself, when you don't expect anything, and when you work really hard. And sometimes at the beginning of your business, it means you're working for free and you're willing to kind of put in the blood, sweat, and tears to get there, because you never know what's going to happen. So I would just say, like, if you compare passion with grit and drive and sometimes a little bit of embarrassment, you will be surprised what can happen.
Wow, I love that. And what does a session with you look like?
So it's a lot of intake. Okay. I would say so the first session with any client is 90 minutes to 2 hours. And we go through everything. So what does day in the life of you look like? How did you grow up eating? What do you like to make? Do you cook for yourself? Do you eat out? Who influences your food choices? Let's talk about your friend groups. What does it look like to go out with your friend groups? What do they like to eat? Because we are a lot of times influenced by the people we live with, our spouses, our children, our friends, and we go through everything. I get all old blood tests. So sometimes they're relevant, sometimes they're not, but it'll give me a history of where we're going and where they'd like to go. We'll talk about what the options are for prevention. So whether that's like an MRI through Ezra, like a cancer MRI. We might do a biological biopsy where we're looking for cancer markers in blood. We'll do a full functional panel. We'll look at hormone panels. It really is a 360-degree approach to where are you at now? What's sustainable? What would you like? What are your goals? And how are we going to get you there? And that can feel very overwhelming at first. A lot of times when you work with a functional MD, like the physicians I work with my clients, it can be overwhelming because you get so many blood tests back, and then they're like, "Oh, paralysis by analysis. I'm not going to change. I'll figure it out later." What I like to do is look for the priorities. And that's where sitting down and talking about, well, what would your priorities be? Like, are you looking to prevent disease? Are you looking to lose weight? Are you looking to decrease inflammation? Do you want to be more consistent? Do you like to cook? Would you like to learn to cook? Like, there are so many questions that I need to ask to understand where the roadblocks are in helping someone to be healthy. Because it is one thing to just say, here's a food list, here's a meal plan, but that is not sustainable long-term unless they have the why, their why, they understand the science, and they understand what's holding them back from meeting those goals. And that is honestly the key. Is a lot of times it's removing the roadblocks that are keeping us from our goals.
Definitely. And do you have any trends that you're seeing or myths that people come in with that you're like, that's not true, or things that people pick up on social media?
I mean, I think there are belief systems baked into lifestyle diets. So back in the day, it was, either whether it was no fat, low fat, no carb, low carb. Then we kind of moved into lifestyle diets like vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, paleo, ancestral, carnivore. And these are less rigid. They're more lifestyle based. But unfortunately, what we can see clients do in this space is they attach their diet to who as like a part of who they are, like it's their identity. And that, unfortunately, when a diet isn't working for someone, it's hard for us to extricate them from that belief system and have them tune into what their body really needs. For example, I might have a client who has watched a bunch of TikToks and they believe that animal protein is not good for them, and they decided to go vegan and they've cut all their animal protein out. And when we get their blood tests, we see low thyroid, low iron, low B12, low B6, and they're dealing with cystic acne, hormonal imbalances, and they're fatigued. And unfortunately, that should be an easy fix of saying, I'd like you to incorporate red meat 2 to 3 times a week. I'd like to see you increase your animal protein to 1 gram per pound of body mass. I want to see these inflammation numbers go down and your B vitamins go up because you're like, for example, homocysteine is a blood marker we'll look for inflammation. Now, if someone has low B vitamins, that homocysteine level is not going to come down. Well, B vitamins are really saturated in red meat. I can have them take a supplement, but we can fix that. But if we have a roadblock because someone's personal identity is connected to a food and lifestyle that they're living, it makes it very difficult for us to do our job. And so a lot of it's unlearning. It's the unlearning of, and the same can be said about someone, learning something online where they think that all plant-based foods are bad for them because they have anti-nutrients like lectins or oxalates or phytic acid. Those are natural plant defense mechanisms that allow the plant to survive, and they can be inflammatory in the body. And so someone might learn one little thing and then say, I'm never having kale ever again, or I'm never going to have a garbanzo bean again, or I'm never going to have cucumber or tomatoes again. And the reality is when we are our healthiest self, we are omnivores. We are able to eat from both sides, and we are able to digest and assimilate those nutrients and feel and live our best life. And so a lot of times that is what my goal is, to just help my client be the healthiest they can be, and to help them break down food rules so that they feel more free and empowered and inspired to use blood sugar and disease prevention as their goal versus dogma or, belief systems that they've adopted from someone else without really tuning into themselves and being clear and aware of where their body is and the health of it.
That's so interesting. You've been so generous with your time, and I literally have so many more questions for you, but we're coming to the end of our time. But before I let you go, I have 3 final questions for you that we call the Thoughtful 3. Okay. So first, what are some healthy habits that you've personally picked up since starting Be Well by Kelly?
So I created a smoothie recipe. It's a formula. It's called the Fab Four smoothie. And I use the Fab Four smoothie. I mean, here it is. All empty now. I drank it already. But a lot of times we use the excuse that we don't have time to make ourselves a healthy meal. And I get that. I have 3 boys, 5 and under. I am the working parent. I am the room mom. There's a lot going on in my life too. But if you can learn to use a blender and you can use the Fab Four as guidance to fill your blender with the Fab Four, you actually can blend up a blood sugar balancing smoothie. And the majority of smoothies out there are all fruit or all sugar, and they do dysregulate blood sugar. It causes a really quick, fast spike and a crash because we've used the blender to obliterate the sugar and starch out of the fiber, right? So it's going to be faster to digest. It can be more dysregulating. And so I use the Fab Four smoothie every single day, whether I might have, a veggie egg scramble for breakfast and take the Fab Four smoothie with me for lunch, like I did today, because we're interviewing here this afternoon and I've had a busy work day. It's quick and easy, supports my blood sugar balance. And it is a tip and a trick that I use every single day.
Wow. What's in it?
So we have, first you fill it with an unsweetened liquid. Today was an unsweetened almond milk. And then I use a protein. So I came out with a grass-fed beef isolate protein and a chocho bean protein. So I have sort of like a meat and a vegetable option. But you can choose grass-fed whey if you'd like. So you want a protein source. You want to hit 20 to 30 grams of protein. So that's the majority of those, like a 1 scoop of protein powder from your protein of choice would have. So you hit your protein and then a fat. So I add 1/4 of an avocado to this one. Great other options would be like a tablespoon of olive oil or a small handful of cashews, any healthy fat that is whole food based, throw it in there. So a tablespoon of fat and fiber. So I added a tablespoon of psyllium husk. You can add chia, you can add flax, you can add cauliflower rice, whatever you want to add to get a dose of fiber. and then leafy greens. So I added a handful of spinach. So that's your protein, fat, fiber, and greens. And then this one is my cookies and cream recipe. So it tastes, I used a chocolate protein, and then I add a half a cup of blueberries to it and blended it up. And it tastes like chocolate cookies and cream, but it's actually full of blueberries and spinach and psyllium husk and avocado.
Oh my gosh, that sounds delicious. I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
So what characteristics do you feel helped you succeed?
I would say that looking at a big goal and breaking it down to those small actionable steps has been really positive for me, and not focusing on the what if I fail, because that doesn't serve me if I actually haven't created anything. If you haven't built anything and you haven't taken the step and you haven't started the business or gone for that goal, you've already actually failed. You haven't started. And so, so much fear. I see so much fear hold people back from really beautiful growth and building businesses and families and changing their life. But the fear of the unknown and the fear of failure is a really scary thing. And I don't know if it was the way that I was raised. I don't know if it was the fact that I was the oldest of three sisters. You know, I'm not really sure. Nature, nurture, was I born this way? But I can stay excited enough to take the first step and then let momentum get me to the finish line without allowing fear to get in the way.
Yeah, definitely. And then lastly, if there's one thing that listeners can take away from this conversation, what would you want it to be?
I would say use the Fab Four whenever you can. Yeah. Protein, fat, fiber, and greens. Like whether you are ordering at a restaurant or checking your kid's plate. I mean, that's the easiest thing for most of the moms that I work with and dads that I work with too, is look at a plate. It could easily be a kid's plate with a toaster waffle, berries, and syrup. And you're like, actually, all three of those things are blood sugar spiking foods. So how can you add, some chicken sausage to that, or a scrambled egg? And can you make the choice to, swap out that maple syrup for a tablespoon of peanut butter on that waffle? Like there's so many ways to use the Fab Four to really straighten the path and get back on blood sugar balance.
Amazing. And for listeners who want to hear more about everything, all the amazing things that you've had to say, your podcast has over 12 million downloads, which congratulations. That's incredible. And what is it called?
It's called the Be Well by Kelly podcast. So you can find me on all the socials at Be Well by Kelly. Won't say that I'm as active on TikTok as I probably should be, but Instagram and Facebook and on our podcast. And then I wrote the books Body Love and Body Love Every Day. You can get those anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore. And I have courses actually that teach the Fab Four. So I have the Fab Four Smoothie course, which is a mini course. I have Fab Four Fundamentals, which goes a little bit deeper into the science like my books. Fab Four Under 4 for parents who would like to balance the blood sugar of their kids, and Fab Four Pregnancy for anyone looking to balance their blood sugar before they get pregnant, up their nutrient density to make sure their body is ready and prepared for 10 months of being pregnant.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time. This was so informative and fun.
Thanks, Chelsea.